That could be. Yeah. Okay.
That's all good.
Okay. 6 o'clock. Chelsea made it. Thank you.
Yep,
Must have hurried. We appreciate that.
yep.
Going to call to order and have a roll call. Jenny, please.
Jenkins.
Here.
Triplet. Here. Sires.
Here.
Colfest.
Here.
Pregnants. Here. Polk.
Here. Assume everybody has the agenda. Ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, passes. Jenny, has anybody commented you about public comments?
No, sir.
Contacted you, excuse me?
No.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to say something that isn't on the agenda tonight? Okay. Let's move on and ask for approval of the P&Z Commission meeting minutes for May 16th, 2022. Need a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We're on item 6. Recommend the council approve plat of survey proceeds 2022-71, 2022-72, 2022-1112, known as Eastern Properties. And before we start, I'd like to say one thing. I went through this, I had to read it 2 or 3 times. It's kind of incredibly complicated for staff to put this together for us. That includes Chelsea, Jack, Snyder, and Kathleen. So kind of made me appreciate all the hard work and thought that you always put into something. And it really showed here tonight. This isn't easy. Thank you for supporting us and making it easier for us to do that. So, and I speak for everybody because we all feel that way. So let's go ahead with number 6. And would you like to start, or
Sure, yeah, do you want me to go through it first, or?
I'm just here in case you have questions, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, not a problem. Essentially, this project is kind of what appears to be a fairly straightforward project. There's 2 properties that are owned by members of the same family. They did there's a title transfer, and the way the parcels are currently divided, the garage and driveway that was being used by the south half is actually on the north parcel. And so this really is a fairly straightforward process, just to take that parcel and kind of redraw the property lines so that the garage and the driveway for the south house are on the south property, and then there will be a driveway, there's an existing driveway, and there was an old garage that's been removed. It's on the north side of the north parcel to serve that property. The complicated part of it, just like I said, it sounded easy, but number 1, it needed a petition waiver for sidewalks because there aren't any sidewalks there. And at this point in time, since it wouldn't connect anywhere, we staff had felt that a petition waiver for future sidewalks at that location made some sense. Then the other issue was that the right-of-way didn't meet code for an arterial street, so it required an additional 17 feet of right-of-way. So they did provide an acquisition plat for the right-of-way to be dedicated. The actual legal documents will be signed when it goes to council. The homes, both of the homes still meet setbacks and everything, so it's doesn't have any negative impact on the lots that way. And then the third piece is that the north part actually falls a little bit within the flood plain as it was defined by the Big Creek, Wolf Creek flood study. And that is actually adopted by code as an enforceable floodplain, just as if it was a FEMA floodplain. So therefore, we've asked them to separate off that lot in accordance to your subdivision ordinance, which makes it simpler that that the home or any buildings on the lot are outside the floodplain, don't need to have flood insurance, that kind of thing. So it can actually save the property owner some headache and money too. So also eliminates the need for a floodplain development permit, because the outlot is not buildable then. So it more specifically defines where that floodway is. And again, that lot, that would require a record of lot tie agreement that would be recorded plat as well. So that's really, unless you have any further questions?
Okay,
Or
thank you.
questions?
Comments,
Scott?
questions?
Now, it's zoned M,
It is.
correct? Does it need to be R1?
Well, it doesn't need to be. I mean, they're existing non-conforming homes now. Property owner would like to rezone them, they could certainly request that. The city's kind of,
Like clean up
And
our
it-
zoning map a little bit, or?
yeah, it would. I mean, it's just a question of whether, whether the potential for that to be redeveloped as a, more of a light industrial, commercially type use could do that. So- But what they're doing is bringing it closer to being in conformance than it was before. So it's not fully conformant because it's zoning, but it's closer. As I said, both. It's not like they're creating a new, it'd be different if they were creating a new parcel for a new home. That would be a difference.
Is there any plans to extend the sidewalk down there?
Not on that side of the road. I mean, we'd like to get a trail in down North Third,
Okay.
but it would not go there.
Yeah.
The ditch is pretty steep, right, on the properties north of this, to where it would be the site in that section.
We really don't like deferring sidewalk if we don't have to. And I mean, we spent some time talking about this one, and we're comfortable with the deferral.
Okay, anything else? Anything, sir, you'd like to add?
The only thing about the zoning
Please
is,
state your name.
my name's Scott Easter,
Okay,
I've
and
been around
address,
here a
please.
while.
Address, Mike.
422 North Third Street.
Okay, thank you.
Is that the zoning, I don't know how, I am going to add on to the 422 property at some point, and I want to make sure that zoning doesn't cause me grief when we go to do it. Because I don't think at some point that zoning got switched. I built that house myself in 1990. I can only assume it was zoned residential then. So I've had a couple things happen besides the zoning got changed and the floodplain got on the north property got moved closer. The lot lines back in the 60s were set up for the floodplain. So in essence, I've got property taken from me without my knowledge. So I don't want to have to go through this when I decide to add on to my house on the south parcel. And say I can't do an addition because it's zoned M1. So that'd be the only thing I want to make sure, kind of, I'm going through quite a bit of expense right now for things I honestly don't 100% agree with, but it is what it is. And I just want to make sure that that's not going to cause me grief 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
It could. I mean, I guess I'd have to look at because you can't substantially improve it. So I guess it may be some small limited, but you could, amount, but you can't typically substantially improve a property. I'm not sure you can even add on to a property. It's not. You could do a remodel, but I don't think a building addition. So you may want to consider, requesting rezoning.
That's what I'm doing. I mean, I don't know how that.
This isn't reason.
This isn't rezoning. There's an actual process. You have to fill out a petition and have it signed by your neighboring property, 50% of the neighboring properties to request rezoning.
Both of them.
Well, yeah.
So we
That's
had kind of touched on this because of the expense of the site plan, because your son's changing the garage that was already there to the same basic footprint, right?
Mhm.
That doesn't substantially change it, so that's why we didn't want to go down a further expense
Okay.
of another application process and we have to notify property owners within 250 feet and all that kind of stuff. So I would say that in the future, if and when you decide to build on, that would be the time to approach that particular part of it.
Okay.
Because it's a separate process anyway from the site plan.
Is there, and just, is there a way that a house was built on that property in M1?
I don't know.
And it,
I looked back,
that's my question. I'm kind of a little, why I would have to go through that expense again when it was actually, I did everything right in 1990. I'm not sure
I
why.
couldn't find anything onto, I look back as, I started working for the city in 2003. It was zoned M1 then. That's all I can tell you. And I was looking through our files. I couldn't find where, so I can't tell you why it was zoned M1 or when it was zoned M1. And I didn't have maps older than that at my, you may have something deep in your files. I don't know, but that's as far back as I could go.
And I asked Mike just if he remembered, because he's been here for 22 odd years or whatever. And the only thing he thought of is it was zoned that way because of the proximity to the water plant. But I have no idea. Today's standards, since I worked for the city, obviously you can't change zoning without notifying the property owner. So I would have to make the assumption that it got built with the zoning as already M1, and at that particular time, whoever the building inspector was didn't catch it or flag it. Now that doesn't mean that's the case, that's just what we're assuming based on what we have in our files.
But you might see my frustration.
I do.
Yeah.
Does M1 zoning allow to build a house on it?
I don't believe so.
It doesn't.
And do our,
Maybe a guard, if it was I think it might allow like an accessory guard structure if it was a big, large plant, but not a single family detached by
and
itself.
do our building permits back to the park? Those are all new to that, so are we.
There would be a building permit for his home, yes. Does it look like the process today? No, it's a carbon copy type one sheet that's not gonna give us a ton of information.
Oh,
That's gonna tell us if it's compliant with zoning or anything like that. It doesn't work. We're very thorough in the early 90s, based on what I can see from the files.
It'd probably be on the house plans if you had a set. Usually the cover sheet would say zone.
Yep, and these,
But that wouldn't tell why it got changed though.
Yeah.
No.
From that, if it is residential.
correct. But I mean, if it's been that way since 2003, we know for sure.
Yeah.
The house was, built, what, 13, you do see 90?
In 1990.
So 13 years before that.
And the house next to it was completely tore down and substantially rebuilt in 1985. So there's something a little bit weird there, because that would have been a substantial rebuild.
okay. Anything else? Okay, look for anybody who would like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to council approval of the plat of survey for 422 and 428 North 3rd Street, known collectively as the Easter properties, subject to staff comments and recommendations, dated June 14th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve in a second. Could we have a call, please, Jenny?
Triplet? Yes. Sires?
Yes.
Oldfest?
Yes.
Pregnant? Yes. Vogel?
Yes.
Yes.
I have one thing that I just thought of that I asked to be added to the agenda in an email to you and Chelsea, and I don't see it on here. It had to do with, and I'm going back here, Ron discovering a cemetery plot or something.
Yeah, we, last meeting, well, actually,
Well, I don't want to discuss it.
yeah, correct, yeah.
Okay. Can we just do that at the end? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
I think we fixed it though. Are we talking about the comp plan?
Yes.
Yes, it was adjusted prior to council.
Okay, so it was all taken care of.
Correct.
Yeah.
No reason to discuss it.
Correct.
Okay, taken care of. Thank you. Okay, let's go on to item number, I didn't want to slight what you were so I appreciate it. Number 7, recommend council approval of preliminary plat for Hollywood's Plat 1.
Good evening, my name is Roger Silver, I'm with Millis Associates at 1529 Prairie Ridge Drive in Polk City. Polly Quirk is with me, her and her husband Dean are going to build their home on this property. It is a previously Genevieve Williscow and East Smith's property. Last time was rezoned, and Andy was rezoning it. So this is our preliminary plat. And I've actually brought an aerial version because I know you guys have the paper copies, so you can see the actual plat, but I think the aerial does kind of show it pretty well. We've been working with staff and have accomplished almost all of the comments. In fact, I think there's only one left from their recommendations that I'd like to discuss, but in general, the other part is that the project description still lists 2 single-family lots. That's what the original plan was, and it may be what the future plan is, but because of sewer unknowns with whether the sewer was going to come through the Antler Ridge development working on Dean and John Larson, or whether there's a possibility that sewer going to 415 might bring something to Johnson's means. Without that knowledge, and without knowing which way the best way to go is, they've reverted back to a single lot. And once we have a little more idea of where sewer is going to be the best to serve this parcel, and when Dean and Holly are ready, we may come back in the future with another buildable parcel down here. Was old home site has been removed, but they're looking at that as a potential site in the future. It complicated it too much, so we've gone back. And again, I think without going through each comment, I think the one I wanted to focus on, because I believe we've accomplished all of the comments you see in the staff report, with the exception of number 6. Through our workings with Antler Ridge, and we're going to continue to discuss this, I know that there's a recreational trail connection going east from 44th into this property, or at least into the Antler Ridge area. And the original map they showed suggested it being just on the north side of what is this single state residence. You can also see there's a triple row of white pines right along our line. These are proposed, this is R2 zoning, and proposed to be by attached homes with shared driveways. We've, in Antler Ridge, proposed a trail along the street. I know there's been comments made that that's not what the city prefers. We would like to, in other areas where that becomes more critical, again with trees and topography, like that discussion as part of the Antler Ridge. But the fallback position would be, if that is not allowed, we find a home for this trail, either southern side of the townhome piece, so that red line essentially is the dividing line between Hollywoods. It's also the zoning line. We would propose the trail could either go in that 30-foot strip behind those townhomes there, or potentially on the north side of the townhomes. We think there's at least a viable route in here that keeps it off of this estate lot, and also doesn't create a situation where we're taking out big mature white pines to accommodate the trail. So otherwise, we're fine with the way the staff comments read. We would just ask that, and I do know that they've put in there, unless an acceptable alternative trail has been approved through the city. And I believe we're hoping that by the time we get into construction drawings and final platting, we will have been far enough along with the Antler Ridge to solve that problem. We just don't want to show that recreational trail easily now. If we do come back before you with final plat, and that's not shown, have that be, you can't proceed. Because they are anxious to get through this process so that they can start building their single family home, hopefully this fall. So that, happy to answer questions. Maybe Holly can answer some, but
Yeah, just to clarify, I did send out, Roger, and I believe you were copied on it, an updated memo that did change the description to the one lot. So I apologize for confusion when that went out and it had the 2-lot project there. The other, we're down to 5 comments. The first one, as Roger discussed, was 30-foot recreational trail on the north side. Again, we had just kept that comment in there because we hadn't seen anything except as an acceptable alternative. We've had some discussions, but we don't have a plan that shows that at this point in time. The second comment was that we had asked that there be a note added that no more than 1 accessory structure be added to the site, maximum size of 1,000 square feet. Just because the way your ordinances work for accessory structures, it's more geared to keeping open space, but it's more like a 10,000 square foot, single family lot, where this is 20 acres. And on the 10,000 square foot lot, it says you can't have more than 30% of the lot area covered with an accessory building. Obviously, if you applied that here, you would have whatever, 13 acres or whatever the number is, acres and acres and acres of accessory buildings that you could have on the site. So we had suggested that a note be added that restricts the number and the size of accessory structures so that it doesn't wind up being not looking residential in character. Third one was that the stormwater management facility easement needed to extend 10 foot farther on the east side of the proposed grading limits on east side of Basin F. There was about 3 locations we'd asked for it to be extended, and it got extended in 2, but not the third one. It's kind of on the southeast side of it. And then there were some color issues with the color to clarify that some of the offsite improvements that are in Antler Ridge were not shown in color, so that it didn't appear like they were proposed. Again, we'd asked that for several comments, and there was just a few stray ones that hadn't been changed yet. And then we'd also asked that the fire hydrant be relocated so that it's closer to the T. So it's not at the end of that pavement, but it's closer to where it bends in 2 different directions to make it more accessible. Also, it gets it out of the fall zone of. So I get a minor.
okay, well then, if you permit me, because again, I haven't seen these. It's very possible they came in and I
Oh.
just didn't see.
Okay, all right.
There's only 2 that I'd like to at least make mention of. The first one being the hydrant. I don't think in general we have a problem with that. We are limited to a radius from the hydrant. And so one of the reasons we put it down here was Dean and Holly would like to put their house south of the existing Genesee Scout. So that starts to
Okay.
pull back the length. And so, if need be, maybe we relocate the water main. So in general, I don't have a problem with that comment. I'm just, instead of
Or maybe we
moving the hydrant,
adjust
we
where
might actually,
the turnaround is.
once
So
we
we
have a
can,
better idea where their home's going, if need be, we're gonna make sure it's within that hydrant.
yeah, and I don't have a problem with deferring that to construction drawings because the driveway would have to be paved as a part of the plat improvements. Because once that hydrant's out there, whether the building, home goes in, or if it went in 3 years later, let's say, the city still needs to have access to the hydrant to be able to test it and that kind of thing. So the driveway does need to go through you'll see that this council will see those on the construction drawings. So we will have the opportunity to review that in more detail.
So, and, the color, the easements, that's all fine. We can check that. So the only other one that I am a little bit concerned, and I wanna make sure Holly hears too, is that what they're saying is that they're going to restrict to a single accessory structure no more than 1,000. Okay, so 1,000 square feet is roughly what, 25 by 40?
I mean, it's like twice the size of a 2-car garage.
And in most cases, I would say that's probably the most place to need. But you guys have 20-acre parcel. Even if you do subdivide it in the future, you're still going to have 15 plus acres. To me, with RV storage and other things, it feels like that's getting a little bit tight, but I'm not going to speak. Are you acceptable to putting a note on there that's going to restrict that one accessory? You guys had talked about wanting to have that.
Well, okay, so for now, there are accessory buildings out there,
Correct.
so all of those would be down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those would be non-conforming because they were constructed when it was in the county before the area was annexed.
Yeah, I guess, where we're looking at a 4 to 5 car garage. Now, if that has to be
Is that attached or
Well,
detached?
I don't know that we were planning on attaching all of it, and then an RV part. So if we had an attached, I guess, I don't know if this is even the right meeting for this, but if we had all of those attached, then there's,
It's not accessory.
To me, it feels like we're getting very tight. I mean, 25 by 40, if you're trying to get 4 cars in an RV and you've got a little workshop kind of thing going on, or at least
Yeah.
a workbench, and
so,
so I'm not necessarily asking that be triple, but I do think that 1,000 sounds a bit tight, and so I think we'd be willing to continue to work with staff prior, if that's to be deferred to a final plat note. I think in general, there's probably acceptance that yes, we need to provide a restriction, so they're not putting up giant Morton buildings and horse barns and things, but 1,000 square feet concerns, just wanted to see if there's a way we can delay that until more is known, or at least they have an idea figured out. So that would be severe restrictions.
Do you, I mean, can you recommend something, Roger, if it's not 1,000 square feet? What is it you're looking for?
I mean, can we double it? 2,000 square feet would be 40 by 50, right? That's not a monster considering the size of this lot.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I'm not even sure, at least.
And
Yeah,
we are-
see, I'm not sure I'm even quite big enough, but
Where they put the house. Because it can't be in the front yard.
well, it's only got the front yard, so it's not the front yard where the house is, that's off the
I
road.
hate to be
So
locked
no, they
into
can't do that
that,
by the road,
Mhm.
they could,
because we're kind of thinking
because that's not, front yard is a required front yard.
for our future home, so I guess I hate to get locked into something and then find later on that it's been limited. I
yeah.
do understand the need for a restriction.
All right, we talked up to, I mean, is 2,000 okay with you?
I'm not, I'm less concerned with the exact number as opposed to just having a restriction of some type so that you don't wind up, I mean, theoretically, if it 5 structures out there at, whatever.
Well, and I also, I guess, to me, if you had let's say a 2,000, 2,500 square foot garage RV storage, and then you wanted a separate place for your lawn, I don't know why that, I mean, I can understand that there's half a dozen Warren buildings out there, but because this is a new issue, I'm just hoping there's maybe a way we can continue on with this and continue to work with staff to solve it before we get to the final plat. And we will come up with a restriction that's acceptable to both, I'm sure that note's on. I just don't know if it necessarily needs to be.
Okay, well, I have a concern, right? I don't want this to turn into where they'll start renting out RV storage places, and it becomes that type of. If you're gonna make it bigger, then it needs to have some restrictions on it as to the use of that accessory building. So, and it may not be Holly that does this. She could turn around and sell that to somebody else. They could come, but.
Yeah.
We've seen that happen.
Yeah, I mean,
times,
it's
so.
if it's commercial, but you would be, at this point, you'd just be limited by home occupation, because it's zoned residential, so you couldn't do a commercial use other than if it complied with the home occupation.
So it would be limited.
It would be limited to home occupation type uses.
Okay, so only vehicles that they own.
Yeah, you can't have employees, everything has to be stored inside buildings. There's a maximum area of 25% of the area of your principal structure, so however big their home is, the area that they use for a home occupation could only be 25% of that area. So you would be pretty limited, maybe, if you had a big enough home, maybe you could rent out one RV slot, I don't know how big your home would be.
Okay.
But you would be limited to home occupations, which we've had them add a note saying, so that they understand that.
Yeah. And they could have an attached garage.
Yeah,
I've got a 5-car attached garage in my house.
right, yeah,
It's not that big.
and that doesn't count as an accessory structure.
So
This is
gives them,
outbuildings if you
gives them
will.
more flexibility. Yeah.
So my thought, just based on what Roger was saying about moving the location of our residence south of current house, where it sits, then you have the pond. So I guess we were thinking if the house was this way, it had an accessory garage sitting to one side or the other, that would be the only thing. Our request for moving that rec trail kind of goes along with what you're saying, that we don't really want the liability of people going through there. And yes, in a residential property, we would be renting out or utilizing our property to hold other people's. We've been down there. I don't want to do it again.
Well, doesn't there need to be further discussion on the trail one? To look at that, yeah, is that?
Well, what we,
I think that's what
we would,
Roger's
Just a minute,
requesting.
please, I like
Yeah.
your-
I think that's what Roger's requesting, is he wants to talk about the trail. But I think our concern is that we've not seen a viable option for the trail in this development. And that's why we're proposing the easement along this property, to have that option. And that's our request, and you can get Roger's request as well. But we just have not settled on where the trail will be.
Okay, thanks, Roger,
Mhm.
thanks.
thank you. Yeah, all we're saying is that this is Hollywood, that's Antler Ridge. We believe there are several alternatives that would be acceptable. We can discuss, and I believe that if you were to move the trail that they're requesting from here in the middle of those buffer of white pine, just to the north, we're accomplishing what the Parks Department requested within their map. We're just moving it 30 or 40, 50 feet to the north. Okay, so I guess what we're asking is, to us, that is a fallback position, and we would accept that if we cannot convince that there's a better route up in here. So we believe that there will be a home for that trail on Antler Ridge, and that it would like that not to be subject to Hollywood plat.
Okay, is there any discussion of that or other items from the commission?
I have some thoughts, I guess, and, certainly, well, first of all, I think, the Parks Department, that plan, well, take a step back. We started out with a blank slate of land here and kind of looked to the developer and owner to kind of lay out how they thought the grand thing would look. I believe at the time that was done, Hollywood area was going to be a multi-lot, still large lot area. And so that route was kind of drawn through there with, I forget whether it was 6 or 8 large lots that, that were shown there. So that was kind of the plan by the landowner at that point in time. Since then, we moved forward with the townhomes to the north. And is that an approved
Yeah, it was
site plan?
well, not a site plan, just a rezoning.
Okay, just the rezoning, okay. And so that's how we got where we are, is the landowner and developers collectively said that's what it's gonna look. And so now you're saying you want it to look different. And, myself, if the rec trail went on the south edge of the townhomes, on the townhome property, that would not bother me. But, that whoever owns that land needs to be in agreement with that. And having it on the north side along the driveways as a townhome, I think we as a city have experienced that's, that just doesn't work. To be having a rec trail crossing multiple driveways all of the time. So I think that answer is a non-starter. I think the way the new item 1, what you cited as item 5, essentially saying it's something that needs to be resolved. So if we approve the language that's in that concern statement, it's essentially saying it's moving forward unresolved. It's not saying it has to be there. It's saying it's moving forward unresolved, and unless something else is found, that's what needs to land.
One quick point of clarification too, Dean and Holly are partners with John. very much interested in the ownership.
We're still with the commission. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Actually, can I ask a clarifying question? Are we allowed to go, approve sort of a conditionally, in terms of allowing them to go forward with the building plans, but we keep the trail portion, either where we can revisit that or it gets solved another time?
And that's how I'm reading that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm reading it saying, it needs to go there unless you show staff someplace else where it can go and everyone's in agreement to that. Is that
Yeah, I mean, you
your
would,
understanding of the comment?
yeah, as long as, I mean, that would need to then occur before the final plat comes forward for this project. So, but there are some public improvements that would need to be constructed and that kind of thing. I guess then it becomes up to the property owner if they want to risk moving forward with construction until that's resolved. They may want to say, okay, let's get the preliminary plat for Antler Ridge approved before, because that would, if we get the preliminary plat for Antler Ridge approved, that will show the trail. And then by that time, when that gets approved, that kind of would take the pressure off of this plat. So they would have the option of just kind of waiting before moving forward with construction until the preliminary plat of Antler Ridge was.
Is there a timeline on
Does
that?
that make sense?
Antler Ridge.
Yeah.
We're continuing to work with the owners. Got some recent comments just yesterday. And got to go through. So, yeah, our hope is to be having that come. I don't know what it would be next, but hopefully soon. I know there's a traffic study that needs to be done, so we're working.
I think right now, I think this is what you're saying, is that we need to stick with our staff's recommendation. We need to rely on that expertise from them that they've given to us. And, I don't like to change anything like that. I think that's what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
It does sound like if there's some other possibilities, it's still possible.
So we're saying we're sticking with the trail location
That's what I'm saying.
here until it's defined somewhere else.
Yeah, so the kind of evasive language in that comment saying this is where it is unless something else is found. And that was based on the history of how we got here.
Okay.
I'm still confused back on the size of the accessory structure, and what a motion would look like for that. In just going around our community, I know I've seen buildings bigger than 1,000 square feet in town. If you go down, and just in a street I go up and down a lot on foot is Jester Park Drive. And as you go down there, there is one, the first building in the woods, on the first home in the woods on the right has a huge outbuilding there.
Okay.
And then as you go down on the left, there's another driveway that goes deep into the woods. And in the winter time, when all the leaves are clean, you can see there's a huge outbuilding out there. And to me, both of those seem quite a bit larger than 1,000 square feet. I'm just kind of curious for those that might be sitting down there with a laptop open if they can.
Yeah.
I want to say the buildings that you're talking about are 30 by 40, which is 1,200 square feet.
Okay.
Just off the top of my head, the most recent building permit, it was a 30 by 40 building because it still was less than the 30% of the required rear yard. Kids are bigger lots, obviously.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if they built, those when it was, I would think it would have been.
It would have been. The one specifically by the church, I don't know that was because it was built before I was here.
The Barn Church one was built in the city.
Yeah. I think they all were, honestly.
Just because I know that they got into
Do you know how-
issues. I don't know the size of it for sure. I just know they had to pay for the drive. So that's why I know it was Polk City. It was built just shortly before 2003, I think.
But it's just, those lots are smaller, clearly smaller than the lot they have. And if they have a building that's larger than 1,000 square feet, it's difficult for me to say that these folks can't. I mean, is that?
I agree. I think the setting here is That's what you want, right? That's why you buy this kind of a lot.
Yeah.
Keep things put away versus out, so I'm good with expanding the size. I don't know how we go about determining.
I mean, 50, but you suggested 2,500. I mean, that's a 50 by 50 building. And to Doug's point, if they build an attached
2,000.
garage.
They suggested 2,000.
Oh, I heard 2,500.
You know, well,
Sorry.
if these guys keep going like this.
I mean,
2,000.
Let's hold the discussion. Jenny, please finish.
I was just going to say that if they, whatever size you decide, I think the end of what staff is looking for is to make sure they don't have 3 and 4 accessory structures of all different shapes and sizes. So whatever size you decide on, they could then still build a 5-car attached garage or
Right.
whatever they want, as long as it's part of the primary structure. So they can utilize the space on their lot if they know what they,
Right.
to determine what size they need to build their home.
They can eat with a 2,000 accessory, they can easily have 3,000 square feet of garage space. My garage is 1,000 square feet. So, and I've got 7 cars in it. 5-car garage, 2 lifts.
You still want bigger than that?
Where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Too many old cars. Can't sell them. Okay, any further discussion? It's good discussion, so.
We as a commission, what do we kind of think this 1,000 square footage should be?
I think 2,000 is for myself. I mean, they're gonna probably have some kind of maintenance. I'm envisioning a tractor maybe, and maybe some accessories to that, maybe an RV, even with an attached garage that car, of the size of that lot, could have a lot of equipment out there. So I think 2,000 would be myself.
I have a question. So what's considered attached? So can you have your big house, a garage that is like attached, and then a walkway that's attached with a roof to a 50 by 50? Is that considered all attached? Just asking.
That's a building.
It was, there's one in town and it's considered an accessory structure.
It's an accessory, okay. Then that
That's correct.
makes good sense to me.
Okay.
Not that you didn't want to do all that, I just.
Be a smart way to get around it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Ask a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So Holly was just letting you know that they were considering half gym. Now, that's 42 by 78, so something like that cause a problem if we only got 2,000 or if that was kind of the limit. And so I just wanted to bring that to light. I
What's the
wasn't
square
aware.
footage?
42 by 78.
32,
What's the square footage of that?
3,276.
But does that get to the point of the 30% that you were talking about?
No,
Okay.
because it's 30% of the whole lot.
Oh.
Yeah, you're not.
Okay,
Yeah.
never mind. I thought it was of the house itself, okay.
You have been dividing the lot again, if that were to happen. What size is that?
Well, actually, the project summary had a pretty good description of that. I believe the 2 lots we previously were asking for, or looking at, were 13.69 and 6.4 acres, so 30% of 13 acres of 3 acres.
Yeah.
It's 9 acres close.
And this, I assume the gym is for personal use and not
Yes.
for commercial.
We have 3 children. They're all driving, will very shortly, and enjoy basketball, volleyball, and so.
I wasn't listening. Did you say you're gonna play basketball in there?
Yeah.
Pickleball.
Inside the accessory?
Yeah.
Like on a half court.
It won't actually be a full court. I'm trying to look at doing the minimum we can just to be able to have some rec in there.
non-conforming use.
Privately,
Yeah,
yes.
private.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just for themselves.
Yeah.
And they've got 10 people in their family, I presume, so they can do that.
They can have friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, I agree.
Zoning ordinance is happening.
Just can't charge, that's all.
And that would be totally detached, I mean, it'd be an accessory building, not attached to the house in any way,
You
the
know,
way you see it.
I have to speak with, who did I talk to from Bill? Say, Jeff? Because I don't know how all of that works. Right now, our home is rural Polk city, so it's not part of it. And there was the covenants to deal with that. I don't know really what is allowed. If it was attached, it would be more so looking like an RV type door to enter, you know?
Yeah.
So, but then we get into like 4-car garage with one being extra tall. I don't know how all that works.
There's nothing wrong. I've got that. I've got 2 7-foot doors and a 10-foot door, so that's not a problem. As long as you don't exceed the height of
Yeah, I think it was.
10 stories or whatever it is. But, you know, these people live here, this is their life, I don't see any big deal why we should sit up here as judge and jury and deny them something they want, the way they want to live. And I don't have a problem. Bigger, so. It kind of sounded like a lot at first, but it really isn't.
I'd be fine with that too.
Yeah. Anybody's clever enough to think up the Hollywoods.
I have one question. Do you guys like saying that?
I love it. I think it's great. Okay.
So are we like 3,500, or are we just anything that the city comes
What
up with?
what was the size of the building again?
That was 42 by 78.
I just put in the motion 42 by 70 accessory building.
Is that just your gym though, or is that?
I was gonna ask that.
That is the gym. So would we be okay to ask for 3,500?
I think you ask for what you want.
Yeah.
This many acres, like, from my perspective, this is a lot of space. But I understand the concern for long-term, if they sell it and then now anyone can do anything kind of thing. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want to limit, this is the size of their lot, from being able to utilize that space how they would like to live, obviously within reason.
I agree.
I agree.
Well, it's still limited by zoning, right?
Just one
Well, no, not really.
Somebody can't come in there and do anything different than they want to do.
The
After
only
we
zoning
approve it, right?
limitation
Yeah.
would be is
Yeah.
that they can't cover more than 30% of their lot. So you could have
A
a
wall.
lot, I mean,
But the-
acres and acres and acres and acres of buildings.
Yeah, but we're limiting the size of the accessory.
No, well, if you add it,
Yeah.
but just for, yes, if you add it, yes. But
If we add
but
it.
if you're just relying strictly on zoning, no. That's-
Going back to Deanna's point, I mean, if the gym is one building, but you also have a tractor or other maintenance things, I mean, I understand that you may not be that far along, but is this the opportunity that they have, or can they come back at some point?
Well, we don't need to limit the size of the building. You're saying it's one structure, and then
It-
it's required by 30% of their lot size or
Well, yeah, I mean,
for house and everything.
yeah. But-
Well, but in this case, I think we need to have a definition, so,
Yeah.
we don't have an
Right, right.
Yeah.
I agree, but what is like
Yeah.
the largest reasonable shape?
Guys, that would really be a question for my husband, and unfortunately, he's working in southern Iowa tonight. I understand the need for parameters, I definitely do. I don't know that I have a hard number to request right now. Yeah, in my mind, that's one reason I want to get started is because I'm super excited to play some indoor bowling. And our kids do a lot of youth group, but if I am locked in at getting to a number, is it reasonable to request one accessory building? And like put a max of, I mean, I don't even know what building sizes are, but,
Well, we're gonna do it right now,
okay.
okay?
What about 100 by 100?
Well, I was gonna say, is it possible, if we have the stipulation for the trail, can we
Well-
also put a stipulation? They have to come in front of us again regardless.
The final plat. I mean, you could put a stipulation on it now and then at
And
the
then
stage
we
of
could
final
change
plat,
it
you could
back.
change it.
Go back. Gonna make it more restrictive.
Okay,
So we could set a limit now, and then if they come back with a bigger building, we can give them more space? Is that what you're saying? I mean, I don't wanna get cute with the rules, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to give them a little flexibility to kind of
I mean, it
figure out what
doesn't
they
become
want.
official until it's reported final plat.
Chelsea.
Why don't you guys just go a little bigger than 3,500? Why don't you do 5,000?
Yeah.
Or 6,000?
We're at 6.
I mean, and if they need to come back, they need to come back, but why don't you just put some sort of stipulation in place that's bigger than what they're requesting?
And we don't have any problem with lot size or anything like that.
No, like I said, it was just more the fact that because it is so large, your zoning regulations that you've got now don't really make a lot of sense for this particular property. It's unique in that regard.
I don't know, this is getting a little out of hand, to tell you the truth. So, what's that? We're gonna have to get a somebody's gonna have to make a motion, and we're gonna have to figure something out. I wanna say one thing, that you really need to sit down with Jeff and the building code here, because you can't really have a tractor and a basketball court where there's people there in the same building. And the reason is because of fumes and exhaust like that. And there are codes for that when you do that. When you get a certain size, a garage or maintenance facility or something like that, you have to provide an automated sensor exhaust system that senses carbon monoxide and automatically turns that sensor on. So when you get something of a certain size, and even if you're under the size and you have people, say you have a party in there or a graduation party or something, you can have carbon monoxide which could stay in there and linger and stuff like that. You could be endangering the lives of people. So you need to be very careful about the size of, and what you're doing there, even for your own sake. So, I don't want this size to get out of hand. I think we need to put some kind of limitation on it. So, and I'll wait for somebody to make a motion, and we can see what we all think of that and vote on it. And if we don't like it, you vote no, and we can always do another motion with something different. So please don't be afraid to vote no or say what you think, so. Okay, are we,
Just one thing, you could potentially, if you're concerned about the two structures, have, no more than two structures and no more than a total of 4,000 square feet or whatever. So then that would allow them the ability to have a tractor building. I mean, that's another option if, it wouldn't mean that they have to build two, but that they
Would have that option.
they'd have the option to do one or two and no more than X number of
they can
square feet.
petition it off also.
Yeah,
You sure?
Yeah, it could be one building, could be petitioned off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's also, you start getting into sprinkler requirements and some of those kinds of things
Yeah.
too, so.
Yeah.
So I just am throwing that out there, as
Yeah, that's just,
not trying to make it more complicated.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to council approval of the preliminary plat review for Hollywood's, subject to engineer and staff requirements, comments and recommendations dated June 17th, 2022, with the exception of review comment number 2, the item stating that the lot is restricted to one accessory structure that shall be less than 1,000 square feet. That should be changed to 4,000 square.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, I have a second. Could you proceed with the roll call, please, Jenny?
Pregnant? Yes. Vogel?
Yes.
Jenkins?
Yes.
Triplet? Yeah. Sires?
Yes.
Polk?
Yes.
One accessory, 4,000 square feet, is that it? That's where we ended up. Okay. Now, before you walk out here with your heads down, this is a recommendation to the city council. Okay, you should be aware of that. You can always go and talk to them too. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you everybody for the discussion and the participation of everybody and willingness to help our residents. It's always a good thing. Number 8, discussion regarding Lakeside Products Site Plan Amendment. And Chelsea, maybe you want to lead us on this a little bit?
Yes, I can. And there is a representative from Lakeside Products here tonight. But yeah, let me give you just a little bit of background here. We have been working with Lakeside Products for a few months now. They are looking to put some additional outbuildings onto their lot. And it would be similar use. So right now they have like a white space and it's in the M1 district, and they will rent out the space to contractors that maybe, need to rent space out. And so Lakeside Products came to us a few months ago, asked what their requirements would be for adding on to their property. We've talked about a number of things, but one thing that I think they're looking for some feedback on is architectural designs standards. So the code is a little bit conflicting on this topic. And I sent you all an email this afternoon kind of telling you a couple of recommendations we would have. But I think they would like to maybe make a quick presentation on what the project looks like. Okay.
Hi, good evening, Honorable Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Wally Peltz with Peltz Design Services, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, 50316. Apologize for my attire. I was outside today working, so usually you'd see me with a suit. This is what you get when I work outside. So we've been looking at Lakeside Products. They approached us to add a couple of buildings and do some design work for them, both site plan and architecturally, so we could come up with some costing for what these buildings might cost. They're looking to expand. Lakeside Products does warehousing and manufacturing of dog products, if you're familiar with it. And their business has grown. So one of those buildings is solely developed, is for them. The secondary portion of it is they're always interested in being businessmen and growing. They've got the seed company there that they work with as well. They are actually going to be splitting. So one of them is going to stay, one of them is going to go. Right now, it looks like the seed company potentially might go, but we're not sure. We're still working that out. The numbers that came back preliminarily based on the code, architecturally with windows, doors, those things that we thought, we weren't sure exactly how to interpret the code, whether that would, it says if it's facing the street, well, there's a building in front of it, but you can still see it, right? So then it gets into that gray area. So do you put doors, windows, and all those things? That's our question. And staff's been working with us, and I think we frustrated them a little bit because we're like, well, can you give us a hint which way you guys would go? So we came up with the best ideas to ask the commission, what would be your interpretation, so that we can move forward and get a good cost estimate, determine, whether we expand here. Our numbers came back 212% higher than anticipated, just based on costs of materials. So it's becoming a bit more of a business decision than just a decision, or an inconvenience for us. Ideally, we want to stay. My client enjoys being part of Polk City, but if business demands it and can't afford to stay and expand, then we'll have to look at alternatives. So we're looking for your input. Nothing more than that, of whether we would be required on the back side of one of the buildings to show windows, the percentages of glass for transparency. Same on the front face of the second building that we'd like to show. I think you have it in your packet. The blue rectangle just represent just some rough shapes of the buildings that we found conducive to, as their business grows, they keep adding bays, right? So that first expansion that they've done, they've got stuff in there already that they didn't realize that they would have, because the business has grown since everyone bought dogs during COVID. So all of a sudden the business has expanded and boomed. So it's kind of up in the air. So we would ask respectfully for your input, and let us know which direction we need to go.
So Wally, you'd be looking at a building that would be looking like this, right? With
Yeah, I mean,
that
we're
amount of windows and doors. That's what they're asking for. That'd be subdividable.
Yep, that's what we're looking for, because as his business grows, I mean, we just keep taking bays,
Right.
and it's growing so fast right now. We need to do something.
Mm-hmm. But this amount of window and doors is kind of what you're thinking.
It is,
But you're thinking code might have said more than that?
yes,
Or
code does say more than that.
it does?
It does with the new architectural standard, and consider if it's considered facing the street. Right. So it's behind their main building is there. These two sit behind that main building, but you can still see them from the street, and that's where the code is not. And that's where we asked for direction from staff. We couldn't get a consensus, I don't think. Is that correct?
I wasn't at the meeting, so I
I
can't.
know you were on vacation, so.
We thought it would be best for Lakeside Products to maybe pitch their project to the commission, see what kind of feedback they get, and then they can spend some additional money on the site plan. I think that was kind of where we were stuck, was we didn't want to give them one direction, them get feedback from you guys that was different, and then they have to go back to the drawing board. So we're trying to do this so it's fair to, the company. Yep.
He doesn't want to spend more money with me.
Yeah.
Until he knows exactly what he needs to do.
Okay, let me summarize, I think, what you're asking and how I look at it. You're asking for our opinion as to whether these buildings face the street.
Correct.
And when face the street, to me, that means you see it from the street. Okay? But half of the one building in the back, it doesn't face the street. Okay? It's covered up by three buildings. Okay? And the one building that's on the east side, behind existing building one, potentially you really, unless it's a lot bigger, which I assume it'd be the same size, height and stuff, I mean, you really only see half of it. It's reasonable. Okay? So the interpretation that I would see is that half of that east building needs to comply with what our codes say, and the other half does not. Now, if you spread that, even if you spread what you would need for half of that over the whole building, so at least aesthetically it looks harmonious, I don't have a problem with that either.
Yeah, we were just looking for some guidance, so I certainly appreciate that input. That's kind of where we were coming from, but again, it's not defined, right? What, we were given some examples where buildings were seen from a street where they needed to do the implementation, is the way that the ruling had come. So we're just looking for some clarity. So if you're comfortable with that, I can take that back to our client.
That's me.
Oh, okay.
We've got 5 other people
Understood.
need to look at it, how they want to look at it too, so.
Yeah, I think your property, you improved it. I think it's a nice looking property there. I would go on what Doug said there as far as materials, to do the different color wainscot on the bottom. I'm fine with that. I mean, that property is kind of a campus at that point of 4 similar buildings. As a business, that's what you want it not to look like 2 different businesses down there. So I'd be fine with that as well.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify the code that requires the number of, or the amount of glass and doors and things like that, is that purely aesthetic or is that also a safety question?
I can't point to where that says that in the code at all, so I'm confused.
It was in the architectural review standards.
Well, there's certain requirements, but that's in like commercial zoning districts. So in terms of M1, I'm not sure where pulling from. So maybe I'm missing the code.
I thought the code said that the commercial district is the M1 is a commercial.
It does refer to it, Kathleen. It's a little bit confusing. Hang on, give me a second.
Sure.
It-
Sorry, I haven't looked at a lot of site plans in industrial because I don't have a lot of industrial. And I wasn't.
And was this from our latest update, Chelsea?
No, I think this has been in the code for a while. And so it says in one place there's no architectural design standards under N1, and then in another place it says architectural standards should be referred to the C1 or the Central Commercial District. Hang on for a second.
Yeah, it's okay.
And while they're kind of looking, I'll just kind of lather a little bit, I guess. Just one general comment from doing a drive-by of the site. Looks like existing building 1 is a 1-story building that's offices. And existing building 2 and the 2 proposed buildings are much taller.
They're taller for that 10-foot door entrance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so the existing building 1 is indeed lower, but I agree with Doug, you really won't see much of the east building over the top of it, but they won't be of the same height.
For sure. That first one is that old, that they've added onto that, where there is a warehouse section on the west end of that, if you've been inside of it. So that's where they store, and then they jump across that driveway to the newer building, which is taller.
Okay.
But the ones that we're proposing would be almost identical to the one that got built as building. So building 1 was the original, building 2 was the new one.
And these are gonna be like building 2.
These would be like building 2.
And then before the meeting tonight, I just kind of looked at our map and drove around other M1s in the city just to see kind of what was there. And probably the one that reminded me the most of this site would probably be on the east side of our barrier dam, the boat storage and boat sales. And, from the standpoint, it's at a gateway location to our city. It gets lots of traffic, so it creates an image. And it has a primary building that's zoned commercial, but then the outbuildings are zoned M1. So that the M1 would be similar to the what this is zoned. For that building that's by the street, it doesn't have any windows or anything facing the street. However, we did require stone sections on the 3 corners that you can see from the street.
Hey, girls, can we just stop? I know you're trying to do something.
Yep.
We need to finish this, and
Yep.
then we'll let you. because we can't hear.
Yes,
The thought of having stone on, the east building here, to me, is a little ridiculous, in that we're getting back to the campus feel on trying to make all of the buildings kind of uniform, I guess we have a precedent for a case where we have a large building facing the street in an M1 district, and the street is highly visible, and we didn't require any glass or anything on that street-facing facade. In fact, even on the side of the building, the only real glass is the garage door's glass. And I think that was added later. I think when we approved it, it was a metal garage door.
But we did require some stone.
Did require some stone that matches the rest of their campus, yes.
Yeah. As part of what we did there.
Yes.
Yeah. Although this building number 1 and 2 were probably built before that requirement, what you're kind of saying is that at the very least, the one proposed building on the east should conform to the same standards. However, is it gonna look right with stone on that?
Oh, no, that's what I say.
Buildings?
That's what I say. I
Yeah.
don't think stone.
Actually, existing buildings on the site.
Yeah.
As you look at the two existing buildings, they both, have the two-tone siding, blue on the bottom, kind of off-white on top. And and the sides, even for the larger building 2, as well as the shorter building, have nice landscaping that's well maintained. And so, to me, if on the north portion of that building, well, certainly I would guess probably the whole width of it would want the two-tone and probably have, siding. Would require some shrubs or something to match what's already there, which I'm guessing they'd want to do anyway. I guess the question is would we want to require some windows? We have the case in the boat storage where we didn't. Actually, the windows would probably end up matching the existing building 2 better. But
Is this climate controlled?
They're set up to be climate controlled if they want to. Doesn't always happen. Ideally, the windows issue becomes problematic because people can look in and see what equipment's in there. And the less peaks we can have inside, the better. Just in an industrial type setting for storing equipment, manufacturing things, and inventory. Not saying we couldn't push the windows up, but
and points of entry.
yeah, and we can always put the windows in and then just put black behind. Put a piece of plywood, paint it black, and put a piece of plywood behind it, so it's a fake window. That's not opposed. We're not opposed to do it. But I've done enough of those, and I think it's very wasteful.
Just a type of glass you put in.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider is obviously there's a workforce shortage in our state and everywhere else. And one of the things that they're finding is that natural light impacts workers. And quite frankly, they are recommending in industrial buildings that they find light.
Actually,
So,
some of the roof is where we're looking.
okay.
Still getting natural light. It's just not. It's kind of like when you walk into new WalMarts and Costco's and Sam's Clubs. They have all those big skylights. So that's the idea. That this one has that central lighting system where you have the first, remember it's like 24 inches on each side. Gives you a natural light all the time. So, but thank you for that.
I would say, I'm one that usually has a lot of heartburn around the architectural design and wanting something that doesn't look quite like a Morton building, if you will. So, I appreciate what you have currently on the campus. I understand where you want to go. We clearly want to attract more businesses to City. So whatever the committee or the commission feels, I'd be supportive of. But and I appreciate the fact that you're looking at natural lighting and wanting to be climate controlled, because quite frankly, you're not going to find workers that are going to work in non-climate controlled buildings anymore. Cause I mean, they just get tired and, you know, when they can go somewhere else and make $20 an hour doing something else versus that, or whatever the dollar amount, it shouldn't just limit to that.
They become very inefficient,
Yes, they do, right?
and detasseling has also gone away because it's hot, gross, and has to do it.
Right. Worst job ever.
If you've detasseled, then, yeah,
Yes.
then you know exactly.
So for clarification on the window piece, are you suggesting that as the acceptable finish material? I think that's where Kathleen's confused, and I wasn't at the meeting either, but I know what we've talked about. So acceptable materials, you've talked a lot about brick was required on some buildings. A lot of times that's what commercial properties will utilize. Are you utilizing glass as the acceptable material?
That's what we were looking to, either through the window. We don't think that fake stone would look good on just that one building. We don't think that brick would look good just on that one building. We're trying to keep it uniform with that wainscot layer on the bottom with a darker color with an accent lighter color on top. We just like to keep it uniform.
Yeah.
And that's what we're requesting. And if we do have to put some windows into it to make it just look a little better, we certainly can. As Mr. Sires indicated, there is certainly glass that we can put in that can make it easier.
I have a question about this blue, dark blue strip at the bottom. Is it just on one building? Here's photos here that don't have it at all, and it looks like.
Oh, that's just from the assessor's page.
That's just an example that we found of other industrial.
Oh, it's not the.
That's not our site, no.
Oh, I didn't read that. Oh, okay. Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is a photo here that doesn't have it though.
On one side, but not the other.
Not here, excuse me. This one.
That is on the side that faces the creek, that no one should be back there.
Back here.
Okay.
That's on the west edge of the building.
Okay. So your intention is to do that on,
We would have that, it really doesn't cost us much to do that. I know that portion didn't get done because there was a potential of expanding that building even further at one point, but I didn't do that site plan, so the firm did that site. So I think that's why that one didn't get the lower band on it. These would be fixed buildings, fixed size, and I'd probably do it all the way around just because it's simpler, not confusing for my contractor, and it really doesn't cost me. That's not breaking my budget.
oh, okay. Because you're gonna have to come back with elevations that show it.
That's correct.
And that's the one thing that I say, do, you know, I could.
Yep.
See where maybe if it was a cost item, you wouldn't want to do it and on back west.
I think the explanation was on that one was potentially going to be expanded. Right?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
So just
So-
to clarify, or to make sure, there is no, like, it's not a safety concern for the number of windows or anything like that. It's purely a.
We'll have to have
options or
ingress,
something.
egress based on the building code, but
Yeah.
that's based on the size of the building.
Okay.
And
And that's doors.
Windows don't have anything to do with egress.
No.
It's doors.
I just wanted to make sure
They
that
need
that
to
was
have
the
so many
case
doors and
before.
so many feet apart. And- But if you have occupants and manufacturing and doing something, there are requirements for light. But building department, you need to check with the building department, make sure that when you come back, so we know it's all okay.
You guys use that service still?
safe buildings.
Safe, yeah.
And for what it's worth, I think, I mean, as long as it's matching the other buildings, I would rather see that. If it's purely an aesthetic thing, I'd rather have it match the other buildings than just put them in just because.
That's kind of where I am as well. I think the stone or a brick would look out of place.
So windows, no windows in, is there opinion?
You know, to me, the existing building has windows on the street portion, and it would almost look better to match the existing building with windows on the, strictly on the, from my opinion, on the east side of the east building.
Just
Yeah, I think you can use glass. Mr. Cyrus had a great idea there, just specifying a different glass that you can't see through. Still lets some light in. Doesn't get, can't look into it.
And on the, I'm sure when a site plan would come in, we'll be asking about just the buffer as well, making sure that the buffer is up to the current standard. I know that was I think when the last building went in, that was an issue. The townhomes have their own buffer that they didn't really have to put in. But that didn't take away from the obligation of property, from the M1 property having a buffer there.
I think it was deferred to the next development phase of the project.
There was a couple things that went on. They got a variance for reducing the width from 50 feet to 25 feet, provided there's no windows or doors. So provided this was based on the building, at that time it was gonna be parallel to the property line, and they wanted that, essentially the building to be a fence. So there was a reduction from 50 feet to 25 feet, provided there's no windows or doors on the north side of the building. And with their current proposal, having a break in it where you see the cars, I would assume you probably would have to put a solid fence between the buildings in order to maintain, be in accordance with the variance that was granted for the 50 to 25. And then there was some phasing of plant materials.
Right, and I think, didn't I read correctly that we have to intensify the buffer from that 25?
Yeah, yeah.
So we're intensifying the buffer strip itself, just making that.
Because currently the plantings that are there look like understory trees that are trimmed up, and so there's really nothing at ground level.
Right.
That prevents vision there.
Correct. I believe that at least the preliminary version that we have.
That's on the M1 property. There's a buffer on the townhome side of the fence.
Okay, anything else? Okay,
What you need?
I think I got what I need.
Okay,
It
okay.
sounds like we can mimic the existing buildings with the windows that are on the end, do the wainscot. We'll get a cost estimate on that. Hopefully be presenting a site plan here shortly.
And I did hear one thing, Ron, there's the windows facing the street side instead of something real plain. I think it's a good idea.
Good.
And it'd be a lot. It probably could only be the ones that you could really see, but
Just on the east building.
just that east building.
Fantastic. Certainly.
And we appreciate you asking, and it saves a lot of trouble for all of us, and your client too.
Well, it does, and we're not arguing in front of you, right? You actually know what you want, and hopefully we can deliver. So
Good.
certainly appreciate your feedback.
Yeah,
All right.
thank
And
you.
just
Thank you, staff.
work with staff. We have a lot of trust in our staff, and they
Good.
always do out for us. And-
Appreciate it.
And if you listen to them, and when you come here, you'll be in a lot better shape if you don't.
Said what?
If you listen to our staff, you come next time in a lot better shape than if you don't listen to them.
That's my sense.
Because we trust them a lot, and they, so,
Understood. Appreciate
we
it.
back.
for sure. Thank you.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Number 9, reports and particulars. No liaison, city manager.
I do have one thing for the commission tonight. The city council is working on design standards for the town square. We have some things in our code, not a lot, but we're working on having some higher standards for the town square. We are trying to become a Main Street community through IEDA. We've submitted an application. We are going to be interviewing for that process next month, but one of the things that we received feedback on were you guys need design standards for your downtown district. So we're working on that.
Good.
It's going to probably take me a little bit more time than I was hoping for, but if you guys have some feedback on what you might like to see in those design standards for the town square specifically. So right now, what is written in the code, which I would like to mirror in the document, facades facing a public street shall have a minimum of 75% of the wall area constructed of brick or an acceptable alternative. All building facades not facing a public street shall have a minimum of 50% of the wall area constructed of brick or acceptable alternative. Are you okay with that? Do you
need
think
to
it needs to
define
be?
what the alternative is.
The alternative is defined, at least at this point. I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't change the definition, but it's just defined as, it says acceptable alternative materials where brick is required. So it's very specific to, I mean, not only to any zoning district that would have it. It allows brick, including thin brick and veneer systems, stone, including marble, granite, or cultured stone, architectural concrete or stone panels. So that was, if you recall that kind of discussion with that with the church, Lakeside Church was where that came in. Architectural steel panels. Sometimes I know we get into the definition of what's steel versus an architectural steel panel. And textured concrete block, and then other acceptable materials deemed suitable by council upon recommendation of planning and zoning commission. So that if there's a new material, like say when that Trex came out or something like that, you can't continually update your code with new materials.
I'd really get rid of the steel, just take it out of that exception for City Square. I know we have some in the corner, but
And this is going to be very much focused on new construction, remodeling. We are going to try to, find a way to work with the existing buildings to see if we could bring them into compliance. But this is really going to be specific into what we want new buildings to look like. So you'd recommend getting rid of architectural steel panels.
steel. Whole word steel or aluminum. Metal.
Okay.
In the town square district.
Yeah, I think metal is how I would define it, because that covers a lot of things. Covers architectural panels, steel, there's aluminum. There can be trim and stuff like that. There's always metal trim on a building. That type of stuff. I think if you want to keep things nice, you need to kind of do that, and to go back and work with people to try and bring stuff back up to that standard. If you really want to see something done bad, go to India. And they have all these old buildings, a lot of brick, and it kind of messed some of them up, but there's a lot of historic buildings all around there. They built the ugliest, big old modern courthouse, and there's hardly any green space around it, and it's huge. And it's just like, it's horrible, absolutely horrible. And we're not going to get that there because you have park in the middle. But you got to be careful with your town square. It's a real impression.
Is it correct that we are the only town square in Polk County still?
It is.
So,
All the other cities in Polk City, or in Polk County that had town squares do not any longer. Now granted, there's several around us, but they're in different counties. It's a little fun fact.
I mean, that's one of the things that can set us apart, I think. Where are you hoping, or the direction is that there would be new buildings that would be built, and what you wanted to see in that?
Yes, I think we would be interested in that. I think we'd be interested in expanding the town square footprint. I think we'd be interested in helping, current buildings on the town square meet our architectural standards. I think we're interested in a lot of different things. But yes, we'd be interested in new buildings for sure.
Some cities have like a stated architectural theme, for certain districts. And, whether, that be, Japanese modern or, early
necessarily American or whatever, is there any thought about having a theme? And then that's item number one. Item number two is front roof line lighting. A lot of cities do that in a town square where the front, roof line has the little lights on every building all hooked up to a central on and off switch. And it kind of brings some continuity, to that area.
Where have you seen that?
Actually, I don't think I have seen it in the Des Moines area that I think of, but it's pretty common, I guess, in other areas. I mean, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's common in Europe. So, Germany and Austria and places like that.
Essentially, just lights, a foot across or 9 inches apart, across the front edge roof line of all, and yes, it goes up and down with each building, but it's just on the top, and it has a nice look of continuity at night.
Okay.
I wondered too, related to that in your comment, Doug, is if we're looking for a traditional look, kind of the brick and look, because if we eliminate metal, that would, like the building next door here would be eliminated, right? There's a lot of metal on that, if I remember right.
That's not that thing.
Well,
You're talking
just
about the
saying.
point? Are you talking about the point?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, and I don't have a problem with a traditional look. Like I love brick, and stone, and if we want the town square to be more and more like that over time, that's fine. But I think to your point, I think that would be a good definition to have some, 30,000 foot definition of what we're trying to accomplish.
What a new building should look like.
Yeah. Can we study the square a little bit and
Sure.
get back to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can send you some samples too.
Yeah.
I would also recommend some of the things that set downtowns apart in small town Iowa. My experience is that they're at minimum 2-story, if not 3, and everything in the second and third story is upper story housing. Osceola has a beautiful town square, and they're redoing. And one of the things that they do at Christmas, which I see that we would do, is they have the Christmas lights that come down that cover the front of it. And you can, whether they're all the same color or they have, red, the green, whatever. I mean, it'll set your town square apart. But you really need some height and differentiation between, this is not, the single story that we have probably is not gonna, and plus we have a housing shortage, so it's another plug for that. And what also it does for your commercial-ish and residential buildings is it evens out the peaks and valleys of the rent that you may get commercial, because then you have the upper story housing to offset that. So it might be something when you're having developers come in, they can do. Plus, there's a lot of potential state resources that can assist with that upper story housing.
Okay.
So, just throw that out at you.
And I think that is what does make Polk City a little bit different, is that we don't have your traditional 2-story building in the downtown district.
Yeah.
Okay,
Probably the pub. And
right, that's it.
That's it.
that's it.
Well,
Yeah,
then you
or
have
sit
the
in
rest-
front of
the
it
real
and then
estate.
run.
Oh, yeah.
this one here.
Yes.
Those are the only two that have apartments.
Just off the bat.
Some if all of this right here is gonna go someday.
Right. Right, and we want to, what our plan is to have some standards and build what the standards are going to be. We want to match what we're going to require the standards to be.
Right.
And kind of set the tone for the square. So, okay.
All right.
And if you're working with new standards to bring things up, consider a facade.
Right, okay,
And you could continue that facade on the same facade, like for a block long or something. It would have some variation to it and stuff like
Okay.
that, but it's something, in other words, just not consider one building and this building and this building. Consider what you do with the lot. As far as how it's developed, and you come up with drawings. So show what you want.
Okay.
To do. Those become part of the standard.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, it is multicolored.
Okay, for Christmas, and that's in Osceola?
Mhm.
Okay,
It's beautiful, it's really cool. They've also done some really cool of their alleys. They've designed them into arts. And now they do the twinkly lights, and now that they have it all bricked out and they have music coming, it's amazing.
Oskaloosa is another town that is revitalizing
Yeah.
and doing that alleyway usage very well.
Pella is too.
Yeah, Pella's always been kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of
It's
guess.
just Pella. How do you replicate that?
Anything else?
no, that's it, thank you.
Jenny, do you have anything?
I do not, sir.
Okay, commission, anybody up here have anything else they'd like to put in?
I just have a request that at a meeting in the future, maybe get a refresher on the open meetings regulations. that
Sure.
we need to operate under. I was confused 3 weeks ago. Doug alluded that I spotted something that we overlooked, that I overlooked, I know, and others did too. There was a cemetery missing from our map, for a new area that we moved in that I thought should be at least shown as a cemetery. I don't think we were gonna, but I didn't quite know how to communicate that. We had just gotten done voting on it. And so I was afraid that if I sent an email to everyone, talking about that I would be furthering the discussion of city business and P&Z business. So I chose to just direct an email to staff and copy the chair. And I don't know if I had a concern about sending an email to everybody to talk about that or not, but I know, you generally can't talk about city business and P&Z business to a forum outside of this meeting.
You did good.
Okay, and yeah.
That you did how you're supposed to do it, but yes,
Okay.
I would be happy to do a refresher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
And I'm sorry it took me a week to answer.
Oh, no
I was
worries.
a little freaked out that he's finding cemeteries.
And I've driven by it 1,000 times on my way to Ames. When I go back.
Well, thank you. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for being observant. It's very appreciative. Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn. We might have set a record, maybe not. But it was a good session, and thanks for everybody's input. So we have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?